Hello, everyone. We are live, and I am Katie Halper from The Katie Halper Show, and I'm joined by the lovely Leslie Lee. Hello, Leslie.
Hey, Katie, how's it going?
Good, you?
I'm good. I'm good. Good to see you again.
Very important show that we're doing today. We will be talking to Stella Moris, the fiance of Julian Assange. It's actually not everyone knows this. So Stella Moris met Julian Assange working on the case, and then they fell in love. And while he was in the embassy, they had 2 children, and they kept it a secret. I feel like if I went through that, I wouldn't have been able to keep this low a profile. I would have been tweeting. Like, you know what I mean? It would have been harder for me to use self-control. But my point is that they're like terrible stories. They were spied on. She was told by a Spanish security guard who was in the embassy not to bring their kids anymore because they were going through the diapers to do tests to figure out if they were his kids.
Oh, geez.
Can you imagine that? So this is someone who's gone through awful stuff. There's breaking news that barely got covered, which is that the star witness of the case admitted that he had invented evidence against Assange. No one's been talking about that. We're also going to be talking about the decision of the High Court, which decided that they will allow the United States to appeal the lower court's decision to block the extradition. So there's a lot to talk about, and people need to hear about it. And the press they're doing an excellent job showing that they are abysmal. We live in a world where the biggest freedom of press story, like the biggest story about a single person that exemplifies the struggle for free press, is ignored by whom? The press.
Yes, absolutely.
We got to figure it out. We have to shame some people.
And
we got to shame them.
Oh, yeah, bullying.
The New York Times. Yeah, we got to bully. # bully the New York Times.
Yes. I mean, because the thing is, like, especially during Trump, like they did get in a tizzy about press freeze now and then, right? With the line
mostly when Trump yelled at them.
Yeah, when you mostly just Trump being mean. Yeah, exactly. Not the things he actually did, like not Julian Assange, but like him just saying like mean stuff in general about the press, like nasty gossip.
Very excited, grateful to have joining us Stella Moris from over the pond. Hello, Stella. How are you?
Hi, Katie. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Leslie Lee.
Hello.
Hi, Leslie.
Could you just tell us how you know Julian, and then we can get into the latest news?
Well, I met Julian in 2011. He was not yet in the embassy, but he was under house arrest. So if you cast your mind back to what you were doing in 2011, just imagine how long he's been deprived of his liberty. I joined the legal team to work on his legal case. Then eventually in 2015, we got together and we had a baby in 2017, and our youngest was born in 2019, just a few weeks before he was expelled from the embassy. So our youngest, he's only ever met inside Belmarsh prison. The last time I saw Julian was yesterday morning, but I hadn't seen him for 8 months between October and about 3 weeks ago when the prison reopened to visits for just very close family. So he hadn't seen the kids for 8 months. I had seen him in January in court, but apart from that, we hadn't seen each other. So he won his case in January, and he's being kept on remand in a high security prison in London, where he's been for the past 2.5 years almost, just solely on the grounds that the US wants to extradite him to basically be prosecuted for journalism, and he faces 175 years in the United States.
And 2 things happened recently. We now know from an Icelandic journalist that one of the main, like the star witness against Julian, was not telling the truth. And this week, the decision of the High Court, that order in itself is disturbing.
So this should be, front page news in all the the major newspapers. And I think the reason why it's not is because they're really afraid of the story. The story is the lead witness that the US introduced very late in the day, 2 weeks before we recommenced our hearings in September. They waited until 2 weeks before the UK proceedings to introduce it into this jurisdiction, was based on the testimony of an Icelandic man whose surname is Thordarson. All these new allegations were brought in essentially to beef up the computer charge. So the charges against Julian, he faces 175 years. 170 years of those pertain to the Espionage Act. And it's called the Espionage Act, but really what he's being prosecuted for is receiving and possessing and communicating true information that was in the public interest to the public. So there's no espionage involved at all in what he's accused of. And he received that from a journalistic source. Now, they've tried to concoct a conspiracy with Chelsea Manning, who was the source. And after the initial part of the hearing in February 2020, that accusation no longer was sustainable because we had presented evidence by a forensic expert who broke it down and explained that what the US was arguing was the purpose of the so-called conspiracy is impossible because that's not how these computers work. Without going into too much details, essentially, we ripped that charge apart. And so what the US had to do desperately was try to beef up the computer charge. Basically, the computer charge, which is just 5 years out of the 175 total, is just there so that the DOJ can keep on repeating, oh no, he's not a journalist. It's something to do with computer hacking, with being very vague about what it actually is. And so what they did was introduce this lead witness, the star witness, Thordarson. And Thordarson is a man who was a volunteer in 2011 briefly, and he is a diagnosed sociopath and convicted embezzler, fraudster, and he's also been convicted of sex crimes in relation to minors. You can just imagine how desperate the US prosecution has to be in order to go to this guy to testify against Julian. Obviously a very vulnerable person, and one that has absolutely no credibility. And so what's the newest development is that an investigative outlet in Iceland, a very reputable one, which has won numerous journalistic prizes, has this enormous scoop where the lead witness for the DOJ admits that he lied to US prosecutors, and those lies are the basis of the second superseding indictment, which is the indictment that Julian is in prison over. So basically, it's lies that are keeping Julian in prison, and it's not just that he lied to prosecutors; it's that those lies, are all over the indictment, and the UK judge deemed them so relevant that she also included them in the judgment. So essentially, the DOJ has misled the UK court. And now there are admitted lies where the witness has recanted in both the indictment and the judgment. So this is a huge story. Basically, the story is the US case is falling apart before our eyes. There is no legal basis for keeping Julian in prison. There is no legal case against him. They've had to lie and had to use a sociopath who's now admitted that he was lying in order to keep him in prison. And this is ultimately what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep Julian in prison for the longest time possible. Julian isn't serving a sentence. He's in prison. He's been there for almost 2.5 years. This is basically punishment through process, and they keep on just prolonging it. And it's been, he hasn't been a free man since 2010. And that's when these Manning publications were published.
You said that you think that they're afraid, and that's why they haven't spoken out. The New York Times, the media. Can you talk more about that? Why that is?
Well, I don't know for sure what's going on in their minds. I suspect that their sources in the government, in the DOJ, are telling them do not report this, do not mention this. And that's because the sources in the government is terrified of this becoming known, of the public finding out that the US case against Julian Assange is basically bogus, and that their lead witness has turned out to be a liar, and not just a liar, but a liar for everyone to see. I think that's what's going on. But I don't think it's sustainable over time because it's such a big story. It's so important and newsworthy, and just shows how rotten this case is to the core, that over time it's unsurmountable.